Welcome to the USC campus. I'm Steve Hora. I'm the director of the Center for Risk and Economic Analysis of Terrorism Events, created as the acronym. We are a Department of Homeland Security National Center of Excellence. We are funded by DHS, and we are housed in the Turvey School of Engineering and the Price School of Public Policy. Both of the deans had sent their regrets that we could not be here. Johannes Yorksos, the Dean of the College of Engineering, School of Engineering, and Jack Knott, Dean of the Price School. So we're very honored to have a distinguished guest this afternoon to speak to us. He's the fifth administrator of the TSA. He was unanimously confirmed by the Senate, something we don't see very often, we will not see again for a long time, in 2010. After 26 years with the FBI, where he rose to be deputy director. TSA has 60,000 plus employees. They manage 450 plus airports. But besides the airports, he has roads and rails, he has pipelines and ports. He has our highways. He has our back. He's a graduate of the Anderson School in Indiana, Anderson University, and received his law degree from the McKinney School of Law at Indiana University. So I would like you to welcome Mr. John Pistole.
What I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about not only who TSA is, but why we do the things that we do. And most of you are familiar with TSA from airports. Anybody who traveled last year by plane? Yeah, so you probably know a little bit about it. What Steve was describing in terms of some what we call surface transportation, non-aviation things, we have responsibility, but really in a way of augmenting and supplementing what state and local authorities have in terms of primary responsibility. So, for example, we do security threat assessments for over-the-road truckers who have hazmat endorsements in case there's a terrorist who wants to get a big truck bomb with bad things in the container or something. We work with the ports in terms of the port workers. So we do credentialing of people who work in ports in case, same thing, a terrorist wants to try to do something at a port. But most people know us for being at airports, and so what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about that. And I'm particularly pleased to be here today with folks at Create, Steve and his team, because of what we are doing in TSA is moving from the one-size-fits-all construct that was stood up after 9/11. Of course, you know the TSA was created November of 2001 in response to the 9/11 attacks, with the mandate to not let another 9/11 happen, and not just a 9/11 type attack, but other types of attack, and what we've seen since 9/11, particularly using explosives to blow planes up. And we know there's been several successful attacks on planes prior to 9/11, whether it's the Lockerbie Band 103 flight of the Lockerbie right before Christmas 1988, or an Air India flight going into Vancouver, BC a few years later. There have been successful attacks, but what we've seen since 9/11 is all based on overseas attacks coming to the U.S. So there have been no actual viable terrorist plots of terrorists trying to get on a plane in the U.S. since 9/11. And we like to think that because we have a number of layers of security, the terrorists see as being difficult to penetrate. And so these overseas attempts where people are getting on planes or they're putting bombs on cargo flights to come to the U.S., there have been 4 such planes targeted in the last 3 years, which you may or may not know much about. Those have all come from overseas. And of course, you probably heard the shoe bomber, Richard Reed. You probably heard of the underwear bomber. You probably heard of the liquids bombers and things. Those are all overseas originated plots to get to the U.S. What the terrorists are looking to do, particularly those coming out of the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP they're called, They are focused on trying to blow up a U.S.-bound aircraft. Their highest goal would be to get a terrorist on a plane in the U.S. So to get through TSA security, get through all the layers of security we have, and basically thumb your noses at us and say, for all the billions of dollars that you have spent here in the U.S., you still can't stop us. So what I'd like to do is show a couple-minute clip from a Brian Williams piece on Rock Center several months back, where he talks about one particular bomb maker that, as he notes, we in the U.S. government are very much focused on and very concerned about because of his ability to make what we call non-metallic improvised explosive devices. Those that you can have on your body and go through walk-through metal detector, never set off an alarm. And then I'll show a brief FBI reenactment, if you will, of the underwear plot from 2009, the Christmas Day plot, just showing the power of the explosives that were used in that incident, and then update some other things. So let's start with Brian Williams.
Perhaps the simplest way to introduce this next story is this. The next time you're at the airport and you feel yourself perhaps getting frustrated and having to remove your shoes, think of this story and it may make a lot more sense. Same goes for the ban on boarding an aircraft while carrying liquids. Tonight we report on the world's master bomb maker, perhaps the most dangerous single individual threat to the United States. A man who specializes in planting explosives on aircraft bound for America. Richard Engel set out on his trail on a dangerous journey to an Al-Qaeda stronghold where the effort to protect American lives is risking making even more enemies.
If you're looking for the men U.S. officials describe as the world's most dangerous, you need to come here to the tip of Arabia, to a place where men wear daggers in their belts, where carts are drawn by camels, and the capital is one of the oldest cities in the world. This place is Yemen. And somewhere in this enchanted country, Ibrahim Asiri is hiding. He's a 30-year-old college dropout who's become the master bomb maker of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Its militants seen here at their firing range. The group is now the most active terrorist organization targeting the United States.
This is an individual who dedicated his life to putting together bombs that can kill Americans.
We spoke with author Gregory Johnson in the old city of Sana'a, Yemen's capital. His latest book is on Al-Qaeda and Asiri, who he says spends his days trying to build what Asiri would consider the perfect bomb.
A, it has to be small enough to get through Western security, but B, it has to be strong enough to bring down an airliner. And so this
Put a hole in the side of the
put a hole in the side of the airliner to bring it down to crash.
And Asiri has already come close. He's the man who makes Al-Qaeda's underwear bombs. He used one of them to nearly bring down a flight over Detroit on Christmas Day in 2009. And the next year, he shipped more bombs to Chicago, hidden in printer cartridges. In both cases, even though the plots ultimately failed, the explosives made it all the way through airport security.
Each bomb that Ibrahim puts together is better than the last one.
So this piece goes on to describe more about his bomb maker. What it doesn't say is that he is trained, that we believe at least half a dozen other people he's trained craft, how to go about doing things, and so that obviously gives us concern. What this doesn't have is information from a subsequent plot to these from just a year ago, May of last year, where the same bomb maker made a, what's called a new improved next-gen bomb, non-metallic IED. And by that, I mean, what he did is modify that original underwear bomb, which was literally concealed in the bomber's underwear. And he flew from Amsterdam to Detroit, went through walk-through metal detector, went through security in Amsterdam, and of course didn't alarm. Again, no metal. So this new version, modified in three ways. One, he had a backup initiator system. So this original bomb only had one syringe with a chemical in it that you would use to inject the explosive charge, the main charge, and cause the bomb to go off. You may have heard that on that flight that went to West Flight 253, that the passengers and crew heard what they described as firecrackers going off. And that was actually the main charge, this explosive TATP, starting to explode, but fortunately it burned rather than blew up. And so we were very fortunate on that. Basically dodged the bullet. The second, so he had on the second device, there was a backup system, so two syringes as initiators. The second modification was they took the device, which just having a bottle of water here, almost the same size if you look at the label on down. So this is the size that we're talking about the same weight, same circumference, diameter, everything as the original underwear at the bottom. What they did with the second one was encase it in caulk. Common everyday kitchen and bathroom caulk. Why do you think they would do that? Okay. I'm sure everybody's thinking, but so the idea, what their thought was to limit the opportunity to detect it either by a bomb-sniffing dog that would pick up the vapor from the explosives, or from our explosive detection equipment. So anytime you travel and you check a bag, obviously 100% of those bags are checked for explosives using automated means of doing that. So our equipment is calibrated to detect certain type of explosives. The third modification that they made, that the same bomb maker made in the second generation, next gen device, was that he used a new type of explosive, one that we had never seen before, not only in the U.S. but worldwide. So obviously the U.S. intelligence community, law enforcement community collects information worldwide about any type of terrorist attack. And this explosive was never used before. It's from old Soviet landmines. And so the challenge for us then became, okay, our explosive detection equipment in use not only in the U.S. but worldwide is not calibrated to detect it. So we need to go back and recalibrate that equipment so it can detect. Similarly, our bomb-sniffing dogs, which we have over 800 of in TSA, were printed for that scent of that type of explosive. So if we had to go back and retrain our dogs, as long as we reward them, they'll pick up on any scent. So they're happy campers. So we've gone back and retrained all of them, and so now they can detect that. Now there's no intelligence to indicate that that type of explosive is available here in the U.S. Or that it's being used by anybody. So other than Al-Qaeda maybe Peninsula, this particular guy. So this next clip is just again 15 seconds or so. It is a reenactment of that underwear device from Christmas Day 2009. And again, on this side, you'll see a small device on a sheet of aluminum on a couple of wooden horses out in a field at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. And you can see what that explosive power is. So that's just out, at ground level. So you can imagine a pressurized cabin of an aircraft at 35,000 feet, what impact this would have. Now the other thing that this bomb maker Syria did was build a similar device and give to his younger brother to use as a suicide bomber against a Saudi official in charge of their security services. And his younger brother was able to get a meeting with this individual under the pretext of turning himself and some other people in, some other terrorists in. He got the meeting, and they were actually seated kind of like this from one another. And as the younger brother initiated that bomb, blew himself up, killed himself, but fortunately for the Saudi official, the bomber's body absorbed most of the blast. So the Saudi official was injured somewhat, not seriously. But it just shows what the challenge is that this bomb maker and others he has trained, what their focus is on getting U.S. aircraft or force aircraft here and using these type of either liquid or plastic explosive, the things that don't alarm walk through metal today. So what our focus in TSA is trying to make sure that we are identifying possible uses of this type of explosive, primarily based on intelligence. And what we've been doing over the last 2.5 years is to move away from the one-size-fits-all construct that was set up for TSA after 9/11, when TSA was created, where virtually everybody was treated as terrorists. So everybody in here is traveling, and everybody's treated the same because any one of you, including myself, could be a terrorist. That was the approach that was taken. Well, we know that's not the case, and hopefully none of you are terrorists. I assume that's the case. So the notion is, how can we differentiate? How can we figure that out ahead of time to do pre-screening so we can provide a more streamlined process to promote the free movement of people good with the best security? And so what we've been working on these last 2.5 years is what we call risk-based security. Recognizing, as Create does, that there's no real opportunity to eliminate risk. If we thought we could eliminate risk, there would be 2 to 3 hour lines at every checkpoint, everybody being patted down, everybody being x-rayed, everybody being, it would not be a good situation. So our approach is to manage or mitigate risk. It's to buy down risk as much as we can, informed by the intelligence. This is information that we know about what terrorists are doing, how they're trying to do it, where they're trying to do it, and then to take appropriate steps that balance the security with the privacy and whatever those issues that we might work about here. So that's the approach. And so how do we differentiate? Well, let's say if everybody on this side, if you were willing to share information about yourselves with TSA or with the private entity that we worked with, to say some basic information, travel history, patterns, things like that, we could probably make some informed judgments about you, whether you are a higher risk or lower risk. Again, not dispositive, not saying it's a guarantee or anything, but we can make some informed decisions. So that's what we've done. We started a known and trusted travel program called TSA PreCheck. TSA PreCheck, there's a couple ways you get in. Either you're an elite frequent flyer on 5, now 6, I guess Virgin America just came on. Airlines, U.S. carriers, or you have signed up for a existing known traveler program, the most notable one being Customs Border Protection Program, Global Entry. Anybody Global Entry here? Okay, so you're familiar with that. So that allows you to go to qualify then for TSA PreCheck. TSA PreCheck is a trusted travel program that, for example, here at LAX, we have 3 lanes at LAX that are dedicated for trusted travelers who are in TSA PreCheck. What that means is, as opposed to what has been going on since December of 2001 and having to take shoes off, you can keep your shoes on, you can keep your belt on, you can keep a light jacket on, you can keep your small liquids and a laptop in your carry-on bag. You don't have to take those out. And you go through a walking metal check. And that's because we've done pre-screening of you. So we have a higher confidence, not a guarantee, but a higher confidence that you're probably not a terrorist. And so let's treat you accordingly. Now, we still have, every day at TSA checkpoints around the country, we still find on average 4 guns. People trying to get through checkpoints with guns. So there's still, these aren't terrorists, but these are people who, quote, forgot that they had a gun. So, anybody in law enforcement knows the first issue of gun safety is knowing where your gun is. If you don't know where your gun is, how can you say it's safe? Well, that's a challenge. But anyway, so part of this is just trying to educate and inform that if people would like the opportunity to go through expedited physical screening, then there are some opportunities to do that. So last week, we just had our 10 million passengers go through TSA PreCheck. So it's not insignificant, but the goal is to expand that significantly. Because again, I'm assuming all of you are known and trusted people. You don't want to blow up a plane. So you should all be in TSA PreCheck. So anytime you fly, you should go to a dedicated lane and go through that expedited physical screening, which I guarantee, almost guarantee, that there will be a shorter line. It will be a several minute wait at tops as opposed to whatever your worst experience is in terms of a long line. And that helps us. So we don't have to spend as much time physically screening you because we've pre-screened you, and we can focus our time and attention more so on the people who are on the terrorist watch list or those that we don't know anything about. So if half of you volunteered information about yourself, then we could extradite you. If the other half didn't, then we need to go through normal screening. But the goal is to move as many people as possible into some type of expedited physical screening, either because you volunteered information or, for example, we know from intelligence that if you're 75 or older, or 12 or younger, it's highly unlikely that you are a suicide bomber. It's possible that somebody, just like drug couriers give young kids or the elderly unwittingly to carry drugs or contraband or something. That's possible, so we'll still always do screening. But if we can expedite 75 and over, 12 and younger, then that helps. So if you're in those categories, then you keep your shoes on, light jacket. It's not a dedicated lane, but it is something that we can expedite. If you're active duty military, if you're a government employee with top secret security clearance, these are people we know a lot about. And I would venture to say somebody knows a lot about you because you volunteered information about yourself, because you want to be admitted to a program, you want to be hired at a job. You have volunteered a lot of information. If you're willing to share just a little bit of that, I don't want to maintain personally identifiable information. I just want to know from somebody that we trust that you are very unlikely to be a terrorist. So there's a number of classified things that we do in terms of people coming to the U.S. using information to try to understand what type of risks are involved, and that includes things that you know about. For example, did somebody have they been in certain areas like Yemen and Somalia, maybe Pakistan, or certain places where we know terrorists have trained and are operating. So that's part of what we're doing with risk-based security. I mentioned the goal of expanding. Our goal for the end of this year, so 7 months from now, we hope to have 25% of the entire traveling public go through some form of expedited physical screening. So we screen on average 630 to 640 million people every year in the U.S. at our 450 airports. So we hope to have 25% of you by the end of this year going through some type of expedited physical screening. Now, TSA PreCheck will be one aspect of that. So I mentioned TSA PreCheck is in 40 airports right now in the U.S. There's about 60 actual lanes. So, for example, at LAX here, we have 3 TSA PreCheck lanes, and we will look at expanding those as the numbers increase, as need be. We will also look at some other airports, but those 40 are the busiest airports in the country. So it's good for us from a return on our investment, because we have to take people from regular lanes. We have to open up a new lane that's dedicated just for PreCheck people and do that. So that's all to say that we are trying to buy down risk by differentiating between passengers who voluntarily share. I didn't want to use information that people don't volunteer. I didn't want to be a big brother collection agency where we're doing all this. But most people are willing to share some basic information through signing up for a trusted travel program, such as where have you traveled in the past, do you have a criminal history, and of course that's checked. And there's several other things, but that's the basic program. So that's what we're working on. We also have a goal for the end of next year, into 2014, to have 50% of the traveling public. So 320 million people we hope to have go through some type of expedited physical screening by the end of next year. And we have a couple of programs that we're working on that I think will get us there. One is we're working with third-party private vendors to have a TSA PreCheck vetting. So this third-party vendor, whoever that is, would vet people who volunteer information with them, probably pay them some small fee, and then we would do the final checks on those folks. But that would give us a way of expanding that known trusted population. We are also working on enrollment that anybody can go to either, of course, we're part of the Department of Homeland Security, DHS or TSA website, and sign up online with some basic information. We're not looking for a whole lot. Some basic information that we know from intelligence are good indicators that you are or not more likely than not to be a terrorist. And obviously, vast majority, 99.999 whatever percent of people won't match those criteria. So that being said, people will be able to sign up, pay a fee of probably $85 for 5 years, so less than $20 a year, one of the last true bargains that the U.S. government can offer taxpayers, and be able to enroll people in TSA PreCheck. Now that's for this fall going into the end of the year, but I hope to have that up and running so people can go online, you submit your information, pay your fee, and then you go to one of 300 sites we have around the country where we're already doing security vetting. Again, for hazmat truck drivers or dock workers and things like that. You do fingerprints so we can verify that the person applying online is the person who is getting this known traveler number, and then hopefully within 10 days of you applying and going in, we'll be issuing you a no traveler number. And then you take that number, and when you make a reservation, or if you have a profile with whichever airline you fly on most, you put that in, and so that will show up then that you're a no traveler. Now, there's not a guarantee on this, as with anything with risk and things. We will always keep the element of random and unpredictable as part of this process. So you may go through TSA pre-check 9 times, all good, you're just zipping through and all happy and everything. 10th time you may go up and say, oh, well, you need to go through regular screening this time. And that simply is the terrorist can't game the system in a way that is too predictive, so we don't want that to happen, obviously. But our best asset in all this is intelligence. So just one example from that, we call the Yemen cargo block. These toner cartridges that were in printers that were shipped from Sinai, Yemen. They're intended to go to Chicago, blow up over the U.S. One was on a FedEx plane, one was on a UPS plane. The night that we learned about that, I got a call from John Brennan, who was at the time the White House counterterrorism advisor to the president. Now he's the CIA director. He called and said, John, are you aware of this information about these 2 packages coming from Yemen to Chicago? So first I've heard of it. Well, he just got that information from that Saudi official who they attempted to assassinate. They had great human intelligence that said, here's the tracking numbers for these 2 parcels. You better check them out because there's bombs on them. And they're destined for Chicago. So we contacted our counterparts overseas. We tracked them down. One was in the United Arab Emirates, still in the Arabian Peninsula. The other one had already made it to the United Kingdom. Our counterparts went out and inspected the packages. They both came back and said, no, there's some used clothing, there's some books, and there's a computer printer in there. No bombs. I said, no, this is good intelligence. Go back and look. It took the second time the one entity found the device. It took a third time for the other entity. I'm trying to protect sources here. And they actually had a bomb-sniffing dog go by and didn't pick up. And they actually took out the toner from the one printer, and it didn't go off. That's how well designed. So what we're facing is, and this is in Yemen. This is not in a nice research lab here in the U.S. with all good equipment and sophistication and all that. These are people who are determined, and they are adept at the design and the construction and concealment of particularly non-metallic IEDs. So that's what we are facing here in TSA, that somebody, and we just have to look at the brothers in Boston, at the Boston Marathon. Whether they're radicalized in Chechnya or they learned how to make these pressure cooker bombs from on the internet. There's all kinds of things, Anarchist Cookbook, there's Inspired Magazine, how to make a bomb how to make a bomb in your mom's kitchen using commonly available things. There's all kinds of instructions on the internet how to make improvised explosive devices. So that's what we're looking at. Now, obviously somebody comes to a checkpoint at LAX with a pressure cooker, and it's sealed, and that's not a good thing. The pressure cookers themselves are not forbidden from being on site. Obviously, it's what's in them. So part of this paradigm shift for us is to say, yes, the items can be a problem, but it's more the person who has the item. And my example being an FBI agent for almost 27 years, I almost traveled armed. So I didn't go through security, pre-9/11, post-9/11, and I guess that's one of the ironies that you're on the head of TSA, and I've never come through TSA security or anything, but anyway, I do now, so I always go through security, and I am in pre-check, and I like it, so it's good. But that whole notion of, I was allowed to get on a plane, even though I had a gun. Well, guns are not good on planes, but they're okay if the person who has it is a trustworthy person. So that's the notion. How can we focus more on the person and the intent, and not so much on the object? So if the object is bad, but it's with a good person, now somebody may be able to get that from a good person on the flight. There's so many what-if possibilities, but that's our approach. And that's why our top priority for this year and next year is to expand the known and trusted population so we can do that differentiation, do the pre-screening, and facilitate, again, free movement of people and goods with the best security. So there's a lot of other things that we are doing, and we'd be glad to touch on any things that I've already mentioned or if you have questions. But I'd just like to pause there and open it up for your questions, comments, suggestions, recommendations, and glad to be here. So. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the pressure cooker.
Yes, ma'am.
Right after Dawson, Devil came to the pressure. Take us through the thing.
So was this somebody going into Detroit or?
I think it's connected or something, the other pressure cooker, the grandfather.
Okay, yes.
All that.
Yes. Well, so obviously it caught a lot of people's attention because.
Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, the question was about after the Boston Marathon bombings, there was somebody flying into the country with a pressure cooker and what was behind all that. So it turned out, the short answer is it turned out to be not terrorist related. It was, there were several aspects to it, but there was a lot of suspicions of it. There's actually a report the week after the Boston Marathon bombing out of Denver that Walmart had experienced thefts of 8 pressure cookers. It turned out not to be the case. As most situations, the first report is not accurate. So I have corrected so many briefings I've done, either when I was the deputy director of the FBI for the director or even for the president. I've had to go back and correct what that first report was because it's rarely accurate. But that's, so there's nothing nefarious to this. Any other question?
2 questions, if I may. One is drones. How come no drones have taken this guy out yet? Especially if you have his picture and you seems that you know where he is. The other question is about profile. Everything that you say comes back to profile.
So the first question, obviously TSA doesn't have anything to do with drones. Everybody knows that. I'm sure you know issues about that. And obviously since Ibrahim al-Siri has been known, there has been an active, what's called a targeting program to try to locate him. So there have been a couple of attempts to find him, and they have not been successful. So he's still out there. Again, the concern is that because it's trained, we notified probably 6 other folks in his trade craft, and others are asking for his trade craft, his recipe, his algorithm, or whatever it is. I mean, they've even talked about surgically implanting these type of devices in somebody. So our advanced imaging technology, body scanners, would not detect that. The body scanners just look for anomalies outside of the body. So oftentimes we'll find somebody who forgot they had a small plastic envelope with blue leafy substance in it, or some white powder or something in it. Not terrorist related, but they got, so we will pick up things. The second part of your question on profiling, that's something the terrorists see the U.S. as being at the top in terms of aviation security because of the multiple layers of security we have in place. But they see Israel as being at the top because of the profiling that Israel is very open about and does. So if you're a 70-year-old Jewish woman, you will go through security very quickly because you don't need to profile a terrorist. If you're a 23-year-old Arab or Palestinian Muslim male, you might spend 3 hours going through security because that you fit the profile of a putative terrorist. So we obviously can't profile the U.S. So we want to differentiate between people based on what they voluntarily share with us. So if somebody doesn't carry a share, if they want to go through the regular lines, that's fine. They'll get the regular treatment. What we're trying to do is taking the recognition that the vast majority of people traveling every day, again, some people want to get from point A to point B safely, 27,000 times a day, flight takeoff from airports around the U.S. Pilots we trust, flight crew we trust, so we actually have them go through a separate security now. It's identity based as opposed to physically based. So that's what we're doing. So we don't profile, but we want to use information that we can in the foreign world. So, yes, sir.
Common question. For me, the mindset of the potential terrorist would be that, for me, the heritage would have to be that, how to discriminate the intentions of it, where, it doesn't matter if grandma's on board or if, 9 out of 10, happen to fit that, what do you call it, infidel profile that they themselves, walk on with.
So for example, we know Asiri, the lawmaker, tested his underwear bomb in Yemen. We have, the second, what I guess I didn't say, the second device, this next generation device, was actually, the terrorist was given to was actually a double agent for foreign security service. So that's why there was not plane bill, but he was given the instructions to go to a safe airport, which he interpreted meaning in Europe, places that didn't have body scanners, and some European airports do, and some don't. To go there and then get on a plane to the U.S. and blow himself up when he got over U.S. airspace. It didn't matter who was on board. So they test these devices. That's obviously what the Federal Administrative Tribal Area between Afghanistan and Pakistan was after 9/11. Of course, that safe haven has been largely dismantled, but that's the concern with particularly Yemen and Somalia as being safe havens for terrorist training. And there's been such great successes by the worldwide security forces against those training areas. But yeah, almost by definition, terrorism is that indiscriminate killing. You look at Boston Marathon. I mean, they said pressure cook down walkway. They didn't know exactly who was going to be right there. Everybody's innocent.
The idea that I talked about when, in terms of these terrorist training camps was, okay, you have an AK-47 and you have barbed wire, lay down low, travel. That was the kind of training that I was thinking. I was thinking, that there was,
That's what it used to be. So they've evolved now to the point of they're not looking to do an armed assault. They may do that, but their ultimate goal is to get a non-attack, well, the blow up plane.
and with those we target for
The training camps? For sure. Yeah, I mean, if there's an identified terrorist training camp in a foreign country, yeah, it's the U.S. government's policy to target them. So,
Most of the dangerous fights that we have outside of the United States, how do you deal with those security threats?
yeah, great question. So it's about if most of the threats are coming from overseas, which we do see that. Obviously, the Boston Marathon bombing it makes a concern. But there's over 275 airports that have nonstop passenger service to the U.S. And slightly more than that have cargo service. So as you saw, Al-Qaeda Minnesota is targeting both passenger planes and cargo planes. So what we do is work with our counterparts in all those 275 locations. We inspect and audit them to make sure that their standards are commensurate with ours. Now, there's different levels of commensurate. Everybody has to meet a baseline that is set by the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, which is part of the UN. And they do that generally, but then most go well beyond. So we are so far beyond that baseline standard. The challenge becomes in having that done consistently. So when we audit and inspect, we are a regulatory agency. They know, our counterparts and airlines know that if they don't meet standards and we give them notice and warning and all, that we can ultimately shut down their service to the U.S., which at that point politicians get involved because that's bad for their economy, that's bad for their reputation. But for example, after this human cargo plot, I was in Sanaa 5 days after that happened to see what their security apparatus was, and it was horrendous. I mean, it was so primitive, and that wasn't even considering what we call the insider threat. People who may be working at the airport in security who actually may be AQAP. I mean, they might be terrorists who are, foxing in the in-house type thing. So we inspect, but our concern is that they're on their best game the day we're there inspecting, or a few days we're there, or when we're not there. So we actually have people in the U.S. government and sometimes private sector that are traveling. We do kind of like a secret shopper type of thing for us. So they report back to us, I just went through Nairobi Airport in Goa. It's kind of scary. Well, I went through fill in the blank. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Administrator Pistole,
Yeah.
for the excellent job you're doing at TSA.
Thank you.
And while pre-check may seem like a new concept for pre-board passenger screening, aren't we really just applying those sort of tried and true principles that have been tested for personnel security and the granting of clearances? Namely, we're looking for a demonstrated pattern of trustworthiness.
Absolutely. So, yeah, there's it's the application of it. So yeah, there's a lot of work that has already been done, a lot of literature. Also, what does here. on how do you buy down risk and what are the economic impacts of that. So it's really just the application of that in a way that has not been done in aviation security. So going back to the international aspect, there's a lot of interest in, we call it RBS, with apologies to Royal Bank of Scotland for the Europeans. But risk-based security, simply that notion that there is a way to differentiate, and it's okay to provide expedited physical screening because we do have a greater confidence. Again, no guarantee. Now, when I was at the FBI, there was a guy working, Robert Hansen. Well, he turned out to be a spy for the Soviets and then the Russians. And actually, 30 years ago, I sat next to a new FBI trainee named Earl Pitts, who wasn't a spy at the time, but when he got transferred to New York 2 years later, as many of us did, he was upset because there's no cost differential, no housing, and he got upset, and so he decided to sell secrets to the Soviets. This is in the mid-80s, because he's mad at the FBI. Well, so there's no, and then Major Hassan, you know, the Fort Hood shooter, I'm here, he's an Army officer, he's a medical doctor, a psychiatrist. So there's no guarantees, any group of people, that everyone is going to trust them. The Egypt Air 990 crash off the coast of Rhode Island back in 1999, Halloween night. I helped on the salvage operations of that because it went down in the Atlantic Ocean. And we didn't find any forensics from that to say what caused the plane didn't blow up. So why did it not? Well, we found out later through some other agency work that it was actually the co-pilot who crashed the plane in the suicide mission because he was upset. There were 31 Egyptian military officers on board that he wanted to kill, and he was one to die. How much physical screening would it take for us to discern that person is a threat? It's not what was on his person, it's what's in his head, his intent, and in his hands, he opened the aircraft. So when the pilot stepped out to go to the lab, he put the plane into a nosedive, and the pilot came in and fought with him, and they got the plane to come back up, and within 16,000 feet, it went down and obliterated in the ocean. So, yes.
I was wondering, in the early days after 9/11, Intel seemed to be very stovepiped, and it seems today that the intelligence flow is at least improved, and I was curious what steps were taken to improve that flow.
Yeah, so a number of things, and I would highly recommend if you're interested in reading a very good body of work. The 9/11 Commission report was done, I testified 3 times for the 9/11 Commission, but they did an excellent job of assessing those problems, that stovepiping, and part of their conclusion was that 9/11 was caused by, or facilitated by lack of imagination. So that we in the U.S. intelligence law enforcement community did not envision that, even though Tom Clancy had written about a novel about a Japanese pilot going into the Capitol years before. But the question was, CIA collected information overseas, FBI collected information domestically, and because of some policies in place at the time, there was not only lack of sharing between the CIA and FBI, but even within the FBI. So for example, in New York, there was a group of agents and analysts focused on Osama bin Laden from an intelligence standpoint. So there were certain authorities that could be used to collect intelligence. There's also certain criminal investigative authorities that could be used to collect evidence. And so that's what was happening just within the New York FBI office where I work. And yet there was not sharing between the two because there was this wall that had been constructed by the Department of Justice that said you can't use the information from one to facilitate the other. So that was one of the positive things. So obviously that wall was demolished, that triggered the wall after 9/11. And then, for example, there's some structural changes that helped. The National Counterterrorism Center was stood up to act as a central repository for all intelligence. And people from every agency, Intel, 16 agencies in the U.S. government, the U.S. intelligence community, law enforcement community are there, and they share every day. That is their sole job. And so there's been tremendous strides. The FBI obviously greatly changed from being a premier reactive law enforcement agency to being a proactive, preventive national security agency. So that has been a major takeaway. So, and then agencies like TSA focus just on transportation. So yes.
A lot of emphasis has been made on air travel, usually,
Yeah.
security. How about like the rail travel, which is really dominant? I mean, not much in California, the East Coast corridor. A lot of passengers travel with rail. Isn't that the same trend that exists also?
Absolutely. No, great question. So there's been more people killed in in what we call surface transportation, anything not aviation, so trains, buses, subways. More people killed in terrorist attacks worldwide in those type of attacks by far than in aviation attacks. So almost 3,000 people killed on 9/11. That pales into the overall numbers. And the concern that we have in working with our state and local partners is most trains, buses, subways are much softer targets, if you will, because of all the harming of targets at airports. It is difficult, fortunately, for our terrorists to get on a plane with this type of bomb. That's the good news. The bad news is you can get on virtually any train, bus, metro, whatever you name it, as was done July 7th of 2005 in London, in 102, in Madrid in 2003, 911 days after the 9/11 attacks. There were 200 people killed on 10 trains in Madrid. India and Pakistan, a number of train bombings, Moscow, subway bombs. They're just much softer targets because the open architecture, predictability about things, and there's just frankly very little security screening on a consistent basis. So what we try to do is recognizing those vulnerabilities is to do random and unpredictable screening. So we know from debriefings of terrorists who have cooperated either with the FBI or overseas that there are really 3 deterrents that will scare terrorists away, at least from that initial approach. And that's a uniform law enforcement presence, a canine, a dog, and then CCTV, closely for television. Now, we know that the CCTV is only good if it's not a suicide bomber. So on those July 05 bombings in London, 2 out of the 5 bombers, as with their backpacks filled with explosives, getting ready to go into the London Underground, into the tube, they actually looked up at the CCTV. It's almost as if they're saying, you know, you can't stop us, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be dead in 10 minutes, and we're going to kill as many people as we can. They were, you know, basically, as they saw themselves as martyrs, so they wanted credit. So one of the challenges in the U.S. national security apparatus is, why haven't we seen attacks like that here in the U.S.? So we did just have Boston, but that was really the first attack since 9/11. You know, there's been a couple others that were arguably terrorist attacks, but in terms of something like that, and there's not a good answer to that. There's because you know we've had people go in and shoot up schools and malls and things like that, but not from a terrorist standpoint. And if they did that, you think about the psychological impact that would have. And the bottom line is, it's impossible to prevent every type of criminal or terrorist attack. So how can we buy down risk? How can we best harden targets that would be iconic landmarks, whether Library Tower here or World Trade Center or even things? What can we do to prevent, at least as a deterrent to terrorists, to push them to other targets? So that's our challenge. Yes.
Just to follow up on something you said, you mentioned that it's hard to get bomb in an airplane.
Yes.
So why focus on pre-check instead of the soft deterrent?
So why don't you explain that a little
So
bit?
you're talking about how rail and bus are soft deterrents.
Yeah.
So it seems to be that the TSA is really pushing hard for pre-check. Why not put that, why focus on pre-check?
Yeah. Okay, so I see. So about 97% of our budget is dedicated to aviation security. So one of it is just what the congressional intent is, where we should be. And so even though you may see some TSA officers and federal air marshals at a train stop or a bus stop from time to time, that's part of what we call VIPR teams, Visible Intermodal Protection Response, VIPR. That is one of our responsibilities, but it's not the primary. So as we look at our primary responsibility, where we are the ones responsible for that, really that last line of security, aviation, that's why we want to expand the pre-check to the non-trusted population, recognizing that if there is a successful attack on a surface transportation, then there will be a response in Washington that will probably realign some resources and we'll have some new priorities, unfortunately. So, yes, sir.
Were you surprised by the criticism from the vice presidents and pilots on changing the weight requirements? And do you think that was a public policy problem? Or do you think there was just some more stakeholder engagement?
That sounds like the press, don't you?
Right.
Okay. Is anybody from the press here? Any reporters?
Aren't you lucky?
So the change, so he's referring to the change in a policy that I announced actually 90 days ago. 90 days ago today, on the allowing small knives, small pocket knives, and certain sporting equipment on board aircraft in an attempt to have our officers really focus on these non-metallic IEDs as being what could be catastrophic to an aircraft, whereas a small knife, given the multiple changes in security, including there's thousands of pilots who are armed now, which you may not know about. We've got obviously thousands of federal air marshals that we didn't have on 9/11. There were 33 federal air marshals. Now we have thousands. Obviously, every cockpit door has been reinforced, been hardened. So the idea of another 9/11 happening is a very low probability, still possible. And so this was an attempt to have us focus on those things that could be catastrophic as opposed to may not be. So that was the thinking behind the policy. We've done a fair amount of outreach before announcing this policy and have some indications that there will be some in favor, some opposed. And then as time went on, so we announced on March 5th or April 25th implementation date, so 6-7 weeks. During that time, a number of people raised objections to it from a safety standpoint, as opposed to security, that if an inebriated passenger has a small knife, then they may do something. Of course, we know in some aircraft in first class, there's already metal cutlery, and not to be giving away any secret, but if you take a credit card and break it in half, you can do some real damage on somebody's throat, or if you have a CD-ROM, break that in half. There's lots of things. You take a wine bottle, you break that, obviously that's a weapon. You can take a wine glass. There's so many, and by the way, there are hundreds of people flying every day, like I did, armed. So there's lots of weapons on aircraft today. So what I want to make sure, we get over 2,000 small pocket knives every day, and none of those are terrorists. So this change was, I think, our 14th policy change under what we call risk-based security, RBS. The first 13 had been all well received with strong bipartisan support, and so this is just another step in that. And it was not well received by a number of folks. They expressed concerns. I met with lots of as we call stakeholders, people who have an interest, heard from a number of those, and they expressed some real concerns. So I simply decided that in recognition of their concerns, let's move on to the higher priority of expanding the known trusted population and just move on. So that was in the paper yesterday.
I think we have time for about one more question.
Please, okay?
Yeah, one more. A lot of your RDS program manifests in the form of vetting programs.
Yes.
Quick, secure flight,
Sure.
safety. They all seem to land.
Insider here, he's got all
They have,
yeah.
inside.
Okay.
We're working with your lessons every year.
Okay, good.
On a number of programs. The question is, all those programs land in or mission driven in general. I was wondering.
Officer intelligence analysis.
So, apologize for that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk in a couple minutes about how you see IA's mission now and how you might see it expand, especially as it relates to RDS. Because they have a lot of these vetting programs and people across all of the investigation modes that you administer in terms of landing.
Sure.
Landing.
So our Office of Intelligence Analysis is one of the key drivers of everything we do, because when we talk about a risk-based intelligence-driven process, every day in Washington start off with a classified intelligence brief, what's going on around the world, and that intelligence is what makes us inform decisions. So, for example, we vet 14 million people every day for transportation worker identification cards. We do security threat assessments on them, port workers, all these folks, and then the hazmat enforcement. So millions of people that we do security assessments on, and we're working to include all of them in the TSA pre-check. But what I see is as we expand other programs, the Office of Intelligence Analysis will be even more critically involved as we use that intelligence to do that vetting, because it really does come into that. If I know a lot about you, I have higher confidence in terrorists. Sorry, but if I don't know about you, because we've done your vetting and have done yours, that's what it really comes down to. So you You've been a great audience. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.